briefly today the nature of asbestos, its historic and current day uses, why it is found in soils, and how it is identified and quantified. I will then go on to assess the possible pathways of exposure and relate these to the current legislation. Asbestos will not be going away anytime soon, as despite the introduction of an EU-wide ban in 1999, there are still around 2 million tonnes produced annually in Russia, China and the rest of the world. I suspect REC will be busy for some time with this. We should safeguard against inadvertently importing materials to our new builds made where asbestos is still used. We were recently involved in the analysis of Chinese lanterns being imported into a European country from China, which used asbestos rope to house the charcoal. This is apparently safer than the metal wire, as cattle can damage their mouths if they chew on that. It shows that we still need to be careful in regard to our imports. I hope that as the asbestos legacy is dealt with in the UK, we will be able to explore our improving techniques throughout the world, and we will remain at the high technical end of the clean-up operation. We carry out around 10,000 soil screens a year, and around 4% go on to the Stage 3 fibre counting quantification. Work does seem to be on the increase as developers and planners become more aware of the issues. We have 6 legislated forms of fibrous asbestos minerals in the UK. The 3 main types are crucibolite, grunerite and chrysotil, blue, brown and white asbestos. These are silicon compounds which are related to glass fibres and were formed in the Earth's crust millennia ago. This gives me an opportunity to show a picture of a volcano, which is the genesis of this material. Asbestos forms in the fissures as a silicon soup cools in strands, forming a fibrous rock. The type of asbestos depends on the availability of the contaminants and the temperature and pressure that the material is subject to. Once a material is formed, it can be mined easily and incorporated into manufactured materials. The thermal, acoustic and inert nature make asbestos such a wonderful, if deadly, material. It was mined in Roman times, and there are descriptions of its use as a tablecloth, where at the end of the rather messy Roman parties, they would simply throw the cloth into fire and burn off the stains. Industrialised use started in the 18th century and sped up with the steam and mechanised power coming to the fore. Around 3,500 different asbestos-containing materials were produced, from toilet seats to sewer and water pipes, insulations to boards and cement products. Even cigarettes were given the asbestos makeover as a possible remedy to the label of cancer sticks. They were produced with blue asbestos filters, the healthier cigarette. Certainly you would be less likely to burn your fingers when holding the filter. The snow that fell on Bing Crosby during his scene singing White Christmas was actually chrysotil, white asbestos. I suppose the lyric, sleigh bells in the asbestos, would not have had the same ring to it. Bing Crosby died aged 74 on a Spanish golf course from a heart attack, and he doesn't seem to have suffered so much from that ordeal. However, the same cannot be said for Steve McQueen and Malcolm McLaren, both of whom died from mesothelioma. It may be that Steve McQueen was exposed during the movie shoots, but it is more likely that he came into contact with asbestos during his time as a merchant seaman. His widow has described how, as a punishment, they would have been made to strip asbestos-insulated pipes. Little did they know just how much of a punishment that would turn out to be. The timeline shows how we as a society react to the growing realisation that working with asbestos materials is bad for your health, and makes interesting reading. Pliny spotted that the slaves working in the asbestos mines were dying young of a wasting disease, but it was not until the 19th century that we started to worry about the workers. It was not until 1906 that the first death was attributed to asbestos. Then in 1918, life insurance was no longer offered to asbestos workers. In 1931, we introduced a slave level where we would only kill 1 in 3 of our workforce every 20 years. This predates the introduction of the safe cigarette by 20 years. By 1976, we were still killing 10% of the asbestos workers with the massacre at Hebden Bridge, and political forces began to react with layers of legislation. Now we're only killing about 1 in 12,000 of the population, which is a much lower rate. Given that the latency period for the onset of asbestos diseases is between 15 to 40 years, we are getting to the point where the majority of new reports of asbestos diseases were probably caused during the lifespan of the HSE. The new regime was formed with the 1974 Health and Safety at Work Act. This could be an explanation as to why the HSE are prosecuting asbestos offences with vigour. This has translated into a major driver for the asbestos consultancy industry. This and a general increase in environmental awareness and liability have made for an increase in asbestos-related works. The scale of the asbestos legacy in the UK can be measured in tonnes. It is recommended that we have imported around between 6 and 8 million tonnes of asbestos. This could be used to make around 50 million tonnes of asbestos cement. There are around 3,500 different products and some surprising ones there too. This list shows some of the groupings of common asbestos materials. The top 4 on the list make up for less than 10% of the tonnage use of asbestos and tend to contain the more harmful amphiboles, blue and brown asbestos. As we move down the list, the possibility of getting airborne respirable fibres decreases to the point that getting the fibre free from a bitumen matrix will only be possible using high-energy power tools. These materials, such as pipe chases, cements and unusual items, can end up remaining on the brownfield site from previous builds, and with poor demolition practices adding to the problem, or it may be simply that the factory may have operated a policy of burying its own waste over the years.